very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
We led off with Mel Stride, the government minister, this morning with that breaking news that Sky News understands Humza Yousaf is considering resigning today. Is Labour ahead of course, potential Scottish parliamentary elections, but certainly ahead of a general election, celebrating the turmoil within the SNP at the moment?
I think there's chaos in the SNP and, you know, people of Scotland are being let down. So I'm not sure there's much to celebrate in relation to that. You've got 1 in 6 Scots on NHS waiting lists, failing public services, a failure to get to grips with the cost of living crisis. And, you know, no one voted for Humza Yousaf. And given all of the chaos, I think there should be an election up in Scotland so that people in Scotland can have their say on what's happening up there. At the moment, they're being failed by an SNP government in Holyrood and a Conservative government in Westminster.
Do you think it's likely that he will resign?
I don't know the answer to that, but certainly the way things have played out in recent days, it looks like he's got a few friends left. So we'll need to see what happens in the coming days.
I was talking with Mel Stride earlier as well about the latest migration numbers and the idea that Ireland, being disappointed that they're seeing a pickup in numbers of asylum seekers reaching their shores, is a sign that a week in after the bill passing that the Rwanda plan is working. What's your take on that?
I don't think that the Rwanda plan is workable. If you look at the figures for Saturday, 359 people crossed the channel in small boats. Now, that's more than the capacity of the Rwanda scheme. So they weren't deterred by the votes in Parliament last week. We've seen 7,000 people cross the channel just this year. The scheme will only take 1% of asylum seekers if and when the flights take off. You know, even Robert Jenrick, the former immigration minister, Suella Braverman, former Home Secretary, have said that, you know, a symbolic flight might take off, but actually it's just a gimmick and it's not going to tackle the issue. What
about the idea that Ireland might want to return asylum seekers to the UK? What would Labour's response be to that? Well,
we don't know what conversations have taken place between the government and the government in Ireland, and what I would say is that given the numbers that are still crossing the channel, it doesn't look like the scheme is acting as a deterrent.
But specifically on the idea of Ireland wanting to return asylum seekers to the UK, would Labour say no to that?
Well, I think that, you know, we don't know what conversations are taking place, but one thing I would say is that returns of asylum seekers have collapsed by 40%. There's no real plan to tackle the small boats. There's no real deterrent.
That's the broad point, and we've heard your very clear answer that the Rwanda plan isn't working and isn't workable. What about specifically the idea that Ireland might want to return asylum seekers to the UK?
Well, you know, we used to have the Dublin Agreement in place, which allowed for returns to EU countries. The government ripped that up and didn't replace it with anything, which is why we've seen a huge reduction in returns, a huge increase in hotel use. So the government have failed to get to grips with these issues. We're spending millions of pounds every day on hotels because the government haven't cleared the backlog and they're not returning people. And they don't seem to have a plan to deal with any of that.
Also wanted to touch on the mental health reforms that Labour have been talking about and offset, I guess, by the announcement today by Mel Stride and the Work and Pension Secretary about trying to reform benefits that are paid to long-term out-of-work sick people, specifically those because of mental health reasons. Do you think it is right to look again at some of those laws and rules, particularly as it relates to mental health, or not?
Well, people that can work should work, but we've seen a huge collapse in support for mental ill health, which is why today Labour have set out a plan to tackle and prevent mental ill health. So under Labour, we would put in place 8,500 new specialist mental health workers. We'd make sure that there is a mental health support worker in every school supporting young people. people so they don't go into adulthood with mental health problems, as well as setting up mental health community hubs with open access in communities. So focusing on the prevention of mental ill health. So the government have made these statements, but actually they've not got a plan to tackle mental ill health in our communities.
There's a suggestion in the interview I did with Mel Stride that actually a job itself is part of, not solely, but part of the solution to some people's mental health issues. Do you think that's true, that a job is a sort of gives a rewarding sense in that?
Yeah, I think work is really important. It's really important for dignity, for self-respect. But at the moment, the benefit system isn't set up to support people into work. For example, if you are on personal independence payments, you're not encouraged to seek work. And if you do take a job, then you lose your benefits and have to go through reassessment. That's why we have said that we'd reform it so that you can try work without losing your benefits and without having to go through a lengthy and stressful reassessment process. So that would help to get people into work, giving it a go, giving them the confidence to take the plunge. And another aspect of that would be reforming access to work assessments so that people know what aids and support they might get in a job before starting work. Again, encouraging people to take that plunge into work. And, you know, I know that the government have published a green paper. It's a consultation rather than actually any firm proposals to get to grips with this issue, which has happened on their watch.
Local elections on Thursday. What would victory look like in those local elections for Labour? Is it such a poor result for the Conservatives that Rishi Sunak's leadership comes into question? Or, in fact, do you want to face Rishi Sunak in the next general election?
Well, with the local elections, we'll be looking at our progress in areas where we need to win the parliamentary seat in order to form a government. We're not taking any votes for granted in these elections. We're speaking to voters and fighting for every vote. And we'll see what happens on Thursday. But we'll be looking at our vote share and also whether we're making progress in those seats that we need to win at the general election.
Ellie Reeves, thanks so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Labour's Deputy National Campaign Co-ordinator.